So I'm going to do this portion time lapse because all I'm doing is removing the decorative stitching that I put because I wasn't planning to do a lining. That decorative stitching has to come out because I'm going to need those holes intact in order to stitch the lining into place. Now if you're not planning to do a lining, leave the decorative stitching in place and proceed to the next step of putting the other set of buttons in, basically the cap and socket. But if you've already put in the decorative stitching, fortunately it needs to be removed if you're going to put in a lining. So here I am removing it. That's the issue with building a prototype and you're designing it as you go along, is sometimes you come up with an idea, you decide to do something after the fact, and you have to undo something you've already done. Whether it's removing a button that was put on too early, or removing stitching that was put on too early, and as this is the case right here. Simple matter of just taking a seam ripper, that's what that is, and just slowly working the stitching out of it without trying to cut the actual leather. You don't want to damage the leather. So I do a lot of the cutting of the stitching on the back side, and then very carefully I pull it up on the front. Simple process. Anyone who's tried to rip a seam in sewing knows this process. It's very straightforward. It's something you're going to find yourself doing a lot. A lot of leather working involves removing stitching and redoing it. I hate to say it, but it's surprising how often you have to do it. Just about finished with this portion, and then I'll remove the stitching for the decorative along the flap. At this point the stitching is no longer decorative, it's functional and decorative. Aesthetic design, functional design are a little bit different. That's important to understand that. Sorry for the delay there. I was in the middle of removing the decorative stitch, and one of the cats, the neighborhood cats that are partially feral, partially domesticated, decided to drag a dead animal into the garage and was proceeding to disembowel the thing in the garage. So I'm like, oh great. I literally had to stop in the middle of it and keep it from doing it. Because the last time a cat did that in the garage, it was disgusting. Yeah, I mean, it looked like a crime scene. It was so bad. So I had to literally stop in the middle of ripping the decorative stitching along the flap to stop the cat from disemboweling a dead animal. I'm not kidding. You can't make this up. The only reason why I didn't show it, because it was disgusting. I hate to see an animal dead. Absolutely hate it. It's very sad. Cats are killers, though. I mean, I love cats, but they are just straight up killers. So there you have it. That's why I had a delay. So now I'm back into removing the decorative stitching along the flap, because it's now going to become functional stitching for the lining. As you can see, I already installed those buttons as well, and I'm going to show a method for putting the lining on even though the buttons are already in place there. Because the cap and socket portion of the buttons, as I've said over and over again, I just want to reiterate, are usually put on after you do the lining. But since I've already put them in, I literally have to put the lining on and either remove those buttons or find some way to put the lining on with the button still in place. And that's what I'm going to show you, is my technique for installing a lining when I've completely botched the project already and put the buttons in place. There you have it. That's why I call myself the leather botcher. It never fails. I always screw something up. Absolutely. That's the beauty and the tragedy of being an amateur. You get to learn the process as you go along, and you get to screw up a lot of projects. Can't tell you how many people I've made something for them, and they're looking at it going, yeah, this looks pretty shady. I had one guy that You could tell on his face, he literally was about ready to toss it. He hated it so bad. One guy I never heard from again. The holster I made for him, he just, just disappeared. Lost a friend over it, I guess. I'm almost finished here. Once the stitching's off, then I'll step to the next task of actually gluing the lining in place. And fitting the lining over those buttons. Okay, the decorative stitching that I did along the edge has now been removed. That's not the ideal. The ideal is to not have done it to begin with, and to do the lining first. But I've removed all of the extra stitching. Now it is time to look into putting the lining into place. And I've got a bit of a problem. One of the problems I face is the fact that I've got these buttons in place already. So, first off, I need to figure out how much space I'm going to need here for the pocket, where I'm going to set this pocket. I want the pocket to fit close to where the other one's going to fit, like so. I want to come down to about the same spot right there. I want it to be equidistant. So right there is about where I'm looking for this piece to fit. So that puts the buttons about right here, and you can literally just push on it and it'll give you an idea where your button's going to set. I'm going to push on this and it'll tell me, oh wow, those buttons are, I did a bad job of doing that because it shifted on me. That's the problem with not clamping stuff. But if I clamp it, it runs the risk of damaging the outside. So I'm going to have to redo this. So let me think here. Make sure this is going to be about the right spot. Got to come down a little bit more. What I'm doing, I'm trying to line up this bottom right here with that bottom right there. That's literally how I'm going to do this. And I want to make this about the same distance away as this right here. So I'm going to actually measure that to make sure. About an inch. So right there is about where I want it. I'm going to have no choice. I'm going to have to clamp this. And the problem with clamping is it can leave a mark right on the outside right here. But I'm going to clamp right where the stitching is to try and, at least I'm going to clamp it in a place where it's not as noticeable, because that's where the stitching is going to be. So it's clamped in place. And I'm going to make sure that I've got this lined up and that it's straight. And it looks like it is straight across. It's not, well actually, let's see. No, that's straight. My cutting job's not straight, but that appears to be straight. So, next thing I need to do is I need to push my lining up, flat up against this, make sure it's going to be nice and flat. And I'm going to literally push into the button. So I see where the button's located, and I'm going to take my awl, if I can find it, right here, and I'm going to push right in the center, a hole. Just like so. There's a hole right in the center of that button. Now I'm going to do the other one. Push right into the button like this with my thumb, and then I'm going to puncture a hole right in the center. Like so. Okay? So that's where my buttons are going to be. Next thing I need to do is I need to take my lining. I'm going to move this over to my stamping slash buttonhole location here. Make sure you can see that. And I have my two little holes right there. This is how I'm going to get around the fact that these buttons are already in place. I'm going to actually take my punch kit, And I'm going to take something like this, and I'm going to look for a punch that's about this big. Right about so. I'm going to try to stretch it over the button. So I'm going to punch a hole in where these holes are, and I'm going to try to stretch it over the hole. That's what I'm going to do. I'll start with a smaller one. There we go. Do the same thing on this side. Try to get it right in the center. Like so. I didn't punch all the way through. Let me try it again. Yeah. Okay, so I now have the two holes where my buttonholes are going to be. And I'm going to literally try to stretch it over the button. Like so. That's how I'm going to get around this problem. I'm going to stretch the leather over the button. There's one. Let's do the other. Stretch it over the button. That's the cheat. That's the way around the problem, is by literally stretching the hole over the button. Okay, I've got all my supplies. This is the baggie I'm going to use to slide this into so I can clean it afterwards. And I'm going to set it over here. My brushes are in place. I'm now ready to crack this rubber cement open and get started. Oh, almost forgot. There's always something, man. It never fails. I gotta get gloves on. This stuff's toxic. You do not want rubber cement on you. Smells bad too. Put my gloves on. And when you're doing this, be really, really careful that you don't get rubber cement on the surface on the outside or on this, because it will screw it up. Okay, first brush, the lighter brush here. I'm going to smooth it into the little crack here. It's okay if I get it onto the lining as well. I'm not worried about that because it'll help hold it in place. I'm going to do a nice coat right there. Okay. Push that in place. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to slide this over. Get just this little edge here. Like so. Flip this over, do the other edge. A little bit more of this glue. Just like so. Okay. Now I've done this area, I'm going to push it on, get it nice and firm on there. Try to keep it flat and flush. And then I'm going to slide it forward like this, moving my bag out of the way, of course. And I'm going to do all of this portion now. This, I'm just going to set aside in case I need it. I don't think I'm going to, but here we go. Okay, I'm going to liberally apply this. Try to get it up underneath there, all over the project. If you have to hold it at the end here, that's fine, because it wants to slide on this slick surface here. Whew, this stuff smells bad. A well-ventilated place is ideal. I don't have one of those special masks that are good for fumes, so yeah, I have to be careful. Just try to be quick. Yep. Trying not to touch this with my gloves, so I don't want it all over there. Okay, now I can set this aside for now, out of the way, so I don't get it in my, make sure my gloves don't have any stuff on it. And I'm going to slowly push this on the surface now, like so. Try to keep it moving forward, because once it's on there, it's going to be a little bit difficult to get it off. Like so. Push it into place. Smooth it in. Move the rubber cement out of the way so you don't get it all over it. Like so. Smooth it on there. Make sure it's nice and uniform. Okay. Looks like I've got a nice solid surface on there. Now I'm going to slide it into my bag. And I'm going to check here to see if I have any gooping out of it, and I don't, which is good. I will now slide it in here. And seal it up. Like so. Throw away my gloves, and I'm going to take this in now and I'm going to vacuum seal it. One thing you got to be careful on is this texture, this bag is textured. So you got to make sure this textured portion here is not facing your design. So I screwed up. That texture will actually form in place and screw it up if you're not careful. So I'm going to redo this over again, putting it in correctly this time. You want the smooth surface of the bag. Wait. Dude, I tell you, I'm batting 1,000. There's a smooth surface in this bag right here. That's the smooth surface. That has to be facing the design. Right like that. Okay? You do not want the textured portion on the design section. So I have to redo that. There we go, it's in place. Now I'll slide it in here. Push the accessory button. Okay, so you'll come over here and you'll just sort of smooth the lining into place. Make sure it has that's firmly in on the glue. These bags are not holding very well. I can feel it already, but it doesn't have to hold it. And just make sure it's nice and tight. And then I'll let it sit for a little while and done deal. Make sure this is tight. Okay. And there you have it. It's now vacuum sealed and the lining is now drying. I'll set it and let it dry for most of the day.